Welcome back to another edition of the Penn State 365 podcast. As always, I'm your host, Richie O'Leary, and today we have a special guest, Penn State rivals, Happy Valley Insider, basketball contributor, Austin Mitchell. Austin, how's it going, man?
It's going great, man. How about you?
I'm good. Can't complain. Basketball season is basically here, so I'm excited to talk a little hoops. Penn State hoops. It could be, I don't know, it could be a decent year. But let's jump right into things. Looking at this roster overall, what are some high-level thoughts on this year's team?
Yeah, there's a lot of returning guys from last year. You got 5 experienced veterans coming back from last year's team. Some experienced transfers and some really young transfers. 4 freshmen. So there's a big mix between veterans, younger guys, and I think kind of big thing this year is going to be seeing how well they mesh.
Awesome. So I guess let's start with Ace Baldwin. There was a lot of controversy this offseason. There was question marks if he was going to return or not. I know everyone that follows hoops follows Troy Donovan. There was talk that from Troy's Discord account that he might leave, and he might leave for a big bag. But Penn State was able to retain him. Talk about how huge that is just to bring back a guy like Ace Baldwin.
I mean, Ace Baldwin's an incredible player. We're talking about last year's Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. A guy that's going to be in contention to be an All-American and National Defensive Player of the Year. So huge ad for Penn State, both on the court and off the court. All throughout the offseason, younger players were talking about how important his leadership was to them. They were talking about just how good of a player he is, the contributions he makes both sides of the ball. He'll be the key guy offensively and defensively. So incredible to have him back.
After that is my big question mark. Who kind of do you see as that? We know Ace is probably going to lead the team in scoring. Who do you see as that second leading scorer? Can a guy like Hicks step up? Can a guy like Dunn step up? Is it someone completely different?
It could. I like Hicks. I like Dunn. I like Kern.
Mm-hmm.
I think it could be Yannick Konen-Niederhauser, the transfer from Illinois. And roughly 7-foot center, junior. He led the team in scoring in both of their off-season exhibition matches. Talented scorer, pretty athletic. So for a team that's going to like to run the ball up and down the court, having a center that can move the floor is going to be nice for them. And I think he could be that secondary scorer.
Mm-hmm. Going back to their backcourt a little bit, DeMarco Dunn's probably the favorite to be the starter, if I had to guess, back there with Ace.
Potentially. I could also see them going bigger and having sliding Nick Kern down to the 2, and then starting both Hicks and Puff. I kind of see it honestly going either way right now. Whether that 5th starter is Dunn or Puff just depends on how much size they want to play with from the jump.
You mentioned Puff. Talk a little bit about him returning and Zach Hicks as well, because those are 2 very important pieces for this year's squad.
Yeah, I mean, 2 lengthy forwards that are going to add a lot of size no matter where they play on the court, a lot of versatility. Hicks was huge down the stretch for them last year. If he can become a more consistent scorer, then he will be a key contributor. He could be that second scorer for the team, the guy behind Ace. And then Puff, kind of struggled a bit last year compared to what expectations were for most people, I think. But at the end of the day, he is a very good glue player. He could end up breaking out to that second scorer as well. I don't think it's as likely as someone like Hicks or Niederhauser, but he could do that. Both players play tremendous defense. Both players rebound well for their size. So that's kind of what we're looking at for them, potentially playing the 3 and 4 or Hicks playing 4.
Okay. There's a couple other newcomers to the team. Freddie DeLeon, the 5th from Tennessee, Kachi Nezi from Xavier, but he's been a little banged up, and then Eli Rice. What kind of roles do you kind of see for these 3?
I mean, DeLeon could be competing for that backup point guard spot. So there's not a lot of experience behind Ace and Dunn in the backcourt, which is why I do think, as previously said, Kern could slide down to the 2 as a starter and Dunn comes in off the bench just so there's more consistent veteran leadership on the floor. But if they have a lot of trust in DeLeon, he's playing well, then he could carve out a big role for himself, as he is that next most experienced guy as a sophomore who played just a few minutes at Tennessee last year. Former 4-star recruit, a lot of talent, a lot of athleticism. Just needs the minutes to kind of bring it all together. So he could be a great player for Penn State.
In terms of newcomers from the freshman level, from the high school level, The highlight of that class, the gem of that class, has to be Miles Goodman, number 80 overall, recruit in the last 2024 cycle. What kind of role do you see for him? I know Yannick's probably the starter at the 5, but do you see Miles playing like a solid 15 or so minutes?
I could see Miles getting in at the 5, certainly. Him and
Mm-hmm.
Kashienza, as you mentioned previously, I think
Mm-hmm.
will both split time at the 5. They kind of offer two different skill sets, so depending on time of score, they could see different minutes each game.
Mm-hmm.
Miles Goodman, yeah, great freshman center. He's been out with injuries a lot throughout the offseason too, so we'll see if it takes time to get him going or if he's able to play from the jump.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he does have the most likelihood to be the most impactful freshman out of the jump.
Okay. They also brought in three other freshmen: Dominic Stewart,
Yep.
Javen Carter, and Hudson Ward. How deep of a rotation do you think Mike Rhodes kind of goes with this year? Because it seems like after that starting 5, those next 3, 4, 5 spots even could be like a 10-man rotation.
Yeah, the rotation could be very deep, as we mentioned. DeLeone,
Mm-hmm.
Enze, Goodman, Rice, another transfer, and then those three freshmen are all certainly good enough that they could get minutes at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of the year to prove themselves for the rest of the year. Hudson Ward, freshman from Canada, great
Mm-hmm.
player, kind of rose throughout the recruiting cycle, was under the radar at first and jumped out towards the end. Very
Mm-hmm.
versatile wing. Dominic Stewart, guard, great jump shot. It's he's a great shooter. He's very consistent with his form. Um, and then yeah, Javen Carter, very solid player. I think he is one that probably doesn't play as right away as much. He's
Mm-hmm.
probably later on in the year or next year. But with Ace, being a leader, mentor for him, I have no doubts that he'll be a great player by next year, the year after.
All right, so we went through the roster. That's kind of do a little bit of prediction type of thing right here. Leader in points per game. I assume you're probably going to say Ace, but you never
I'm
know.
gonna say Ace.
Mm-hmm.
I would say second would probably. I'm gonna guess could be Yannick could be a surprise. He's been averaging
Okay.
putting up 14, 15 a game in the two scrimmages. That's two
Mm-hmm.
games, small sample size. So, but if
Yeah.
I just say someone other than Ace, I would say him.
Rebound leader per game.
Probably Yannick as well. He'll be getting the most minutes in at the 5. I think
Okay.
they'll be running a 4 out regardless of their other starting lineup combination, whether it's Hicks or Puff at the 4. So
Mm-hmm.
he'll be the one inside the most.
Assists per game. I'm assuming it's
Gonna
just
be
a
Ace.
repeat, basically.
Yeah, Ace was top 20 in the nation in assists last year. Don't see that changing again this year. He'll be, he's a great passer.
Little bit of a more difficult one. Field goal percentage this year.
Yeah, I mean, Ace is very efficient. Nick Kern's
Mm-hmm.
very efficient. They both get to the rim at a high rate. Um, Yannick's
Mm-hmm.
going to be having a lot more inside shots, though. He's probably the guy. He's not going to be putting it up from the 3-point land as often, which will help his field goal percentage. He's going to be mostly, inside shots or 5, 6, 7, 8 footers.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go with him for field goal percentage.
And it seems like those two just kind of fit just about every category.
Yeah,
3-point percentage is a little bit more difficult too.
yeah. I mean, you got guys like Zach Hicks, Eli Rice, Ace
Mm-hmm.
Baldwin back to him again. Um, I don't know if they necessarily have a bona fide great 3-point shooter coming into the year, but all three of those guys have the ability to and will be taking plenty of 3-point shots throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be one of them. I'm going to go with Hicks. He'll be in the starting lineup. He'll be putting up shots consistently. I think he'll get into a rhythm as the year gets going, similar to last year.
Okay, piggybacking off of what you just said, not really having a great 3-point shooter in today's day and age, especially where the 3-point ball is just so important. How do you see that as like kind of a concern for this team?
Definitely, I think it limits their ceiling. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it will have too much of a negative impact because it's not really their style. They're going to be a team that wears you down defensively and then tries to
Okay.
bang you in the paint by exploiting matchups. Um, but I do think it limits their ceiling for sure.
Okay. Do you see any other concerns among this year's squad other than just being a brand new team, basically?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the backup guard role is questionable.
Mm-hmm.
DeLeone, like him a lot as a player, but he only played, I think it was 15 minutes last year for Tennessee, right around there, give or take a few. Um, so, just not a lot of experience back there.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of that backup center role, same thing is behind Yannick. Goodman, 4-star recruit, great player. Ends a former four-star recruit, great player, but didn't play a lot of minutes last year, similar to DeLeone. So kind of just how the backups fare at those two roles. Important roles. Penn State was a very bad rebounding team last year. When Yannick is out, can the backups come in, just do their job inside? And the backup point guard, when Ace is out, can he control the offense, get the ball to guys like Hicks, Kerr, and let them score?
Okay. Let's look at the schedule. Do you have it in front of you by chance? If not, I can pull it up here real quick.
Yeah, can you pull it up, please?
Yes, gotcha. Hold on. Let's pull this up. I'm gonna do it on KenPom actually, make it a little. So there's 10 out of conference games right now. Out of those 10, you can kind of see. I think it's like 8 in a row, and then they kind of tail off because of the two Big Ten games. But what do you kind of see happening in those 10? I know KenPom's predicting them to win all 10. Do you think they can win all 10?
I think they probably need to win at least 9, if not all 10 of those games that are guaranteed at the moment. They will have another game against one of Clemson or San Francisco in the Beach Slam championship. So, in theory, if they beat Fordham, they should get Clemson, which is going to help out their non-conference a lot. Clemson's a very good team. They'll be, a top 40 team throughout most of the year. They should be at least. But yeah, right now, when you're looking at the only tough-ish game is Virginia Tech. They've got to take care of. They can't have a Bucknell loss like last year. They've got to take care of everybody else, and then that Virginia Tech game. Just with the lack of other good games on the schedule, I think they do have to win it to give themselves a shot at making the tournament. Just because they don't have many other non-conference opportunities, and in conference is going to be a bloodbath. But you're not going to do great in conference, so you kind of you have to do great out of conference.
Speaking of out of conference, like you mentioned, it is a very weak looking out of conference schedule for the most part, if not the whole thing, basically. Do you feel like that's a concern for a team like this, or do you think it's like, hey, it's rebuilding, like maybe it's fine, just let them rebuild, let them get some wins under the belt, and then go from there? Because Big Ten play is tough.
Yeah. I mean, there's no proven guaranteed method that works the best towards improving your metrics throughout the year. Last year, Iowa State was a team that played a very weak non-conference schedule, ran through everybody, blew everybody out, and that ended up helping out their metrics. They got them into the tournament as a very high seed. Obviously, they did well in Big 12 play as well. But then you take a look at the opposite. In Pitt, very weak non-conference schedule. They dropped 1 or 2 games, and that was all it took to take them out of the tournament. They finished top 4 in the ACC, I believe, and missed the tournament simply because they lost 1 or 2 tough, or in theory, easier non-conference matchups. So it kind of just depends how well you do in them. They're games you have to win. You're going to have to blow a few teams out, but they're not going to have as many opportunities to lose if they're not playing that tough schedule too. So
yeah, of course,
could help a young team gel from so they're ready for conference play.
Yeah, going back to this Virginia Tech game, the fact that it's a neutral site down in Baltimore should help their resume a little bit because obviously Q1, Q2 quad rankings, whatever you want to call them, it should be a Q2, I think, but I guess it really depends on what Virginia Tech does. But going to Big Ten play now, they have the 2 games in December, which I don't like that they do this personally, but that's just my opinion. What do we think is going to happen with Purdue and Rutgers? Could they split it potentially?
I mean, Purdue's the pretty heavy favorite to win the conference early on. If you look at the KenPom standings for the Big Ten, they're pretty far above everyone else. That's going to be a really tough game. It is advantageous we get them at home while the students are here. So that does give us a fighting chance to beat Wisconsin, beat Illinois at home last year. But that's a really tough opening first 2 games. I mean, there's not ever going to be an easy game in the Big Ten this year, but it doesn't get much more difficult than kind of 2 polar opposite teams. You got the heavy favorite, just well coached. They play really well as a team. Then you go right into a Rutgers team that has 2 of the best players in the nation. Just a lot of skill and athleticism. And there's not many tougher places to play in the country than Rutgers.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Looking at the rest of this schedule, I think KenPom has them at 9 and 11 in Big Ten play. Do you agree with that? Do you not agree with that? If so, if not, why not?
Yeah, I think pretty close to 500 is a fair estimate. It's going to be every single game is going to be a toss-up this year. I feel like that'll change as the year gets going. There's going to be a few teams that don't play up to expectations and a few teams that exceed them. But overall, it's every single night it's going to be a fist fight. These teams are so even, and that's why just about every team is in that I believe Illinois is projected to take second place and go 11-9 per Ken Palm, and Penn State is projected to take 16th place and go 9-11. So that's
Yeah.
14 teams in between there that are all projected within 2 games from one another. So it's just going to be tough. You got to take care of business at home, steal 1 or 2 on the road, and go from there.
Yeah. It is an interesting year in the Big Ten. I know it's top heavy, I guess you could say, but it's also very evened out throughout. That's really all I'm looking at now. Oh, the Palestra game. I guess what are your overall thoughts on that? Doing that every year. I know some fans have complained about it because it's nowhere near State College, but I do think it is kind of cool and kind of historic.
I think it's a cool tradition. You want to build tradition things within your program.
Hmm.
Just helps, with consistency. Like every year you go to the Palestra. That's a recruiting pitch. That's
Hmm.
a pitch to fans that live maybe out in the Philly area because State College there's not a lot around here. That gives fans further out east an opportunity to come see them play,
That's fair.
be engaged with the program. I believe the game's over winter break too, so it's not like students are going to be on campus and they're not able to come support the team. So I don't mind it at all. And then I think the rec hall later in the year is
That too.
something
Yeah.
that needs to be done every year. It was their best home court advantage last year, helped them beat Illinois.
Hmm.
So that's another just great program tradition. I think that I was very happy when I saw they ran it back this year. Hope they continue to do so.
Okay. Last but not least, I know we kind of just talked about it, but I assume you're going with like a similar record overall to what Ken Palm had.
Yeah, about 500 in conference play,
Okay.
non-conference. Hopefully, don't lose more than 1 game,
Hmm.
maybe 2. I think an 18-win estimate by Ken Palm is pretty fair. Uh, if they want to make the tournament, they're probably going to need to get up to 21, 22 range. They're going to need to steal
Hmm.
a few. But I think it's just a really tough team to judge in a conference that's very difficult to evaluate right now.
Yeah.
So I think it's 500 conference play is very accurate prediction.
Now I haven't studied the new rules for the NIT and all that. Is the NIT a potential possibility? I guess.
Yeah. So the top 2 teams from each of the power conferences that don't make the NCAA tournament will
Okay.
receive an auto bid to the NIT. So
Hmm.
in the year, the Big Ten could get 9, 10, 11 bids because of how many quality teams there are. That
Hmm.
could very much help Penn State because I don't see them being at the absolute bottom unless you're dealing with some major injuries. So if they're right out there on the cusp of the tournament and they just miss it, they could be looking at an NIT bid for sure.
Hmm.
Um, there's there's a couple mid majors that also get automatic bids. I believe it's the best team to not make the tournament from the next like 6 highest conferences.
Hmm.
Probably off on that exact number, but it's something around there. And that leaves, roughly a dozen openings left. So I think their best bet is being top 2 in the Big Ten that don't make the tournament, but
Hmm.
they could get, a bid from the committee as well for just being one of those. If they're, third, fourth best in the Big Ten, they have wins over like a Virginia Tech, Clemson, or maybe they steal something over Purdue or Illinois during the season that could help them get in there.
Now, safe assumption they would accept it because we've seen so many programs over the past couple years just say like we're good, we don't want it.
I would think so, considering a lot of young guys on the team
Hmm.
that are Rhodes going to be hoping to bring back next year, and
Yeah.
he's still in his second year here. I think any opportunity he can get to get Penn State games that he's going to take. But yeah, like you said, you never really know because of how many teams are declining that opportunity now.
Yeah.
Because with the transfer portal, it opens up before NIT play begins
Hmm.
or ends, like during the middle of NIT play. So you're losing a week or 2 potentially of recruiting in the transfer portal, which is huge in today's game. So
Yeah. You're not kidding. But that's really all I got for you. Any I guess final thoughts before we sign off here?
don't have anything now.
All right, cool. So it should be a good year for Penn State, it sounds like. Definitely stay tuned for more Penn State basketball episodes. We'll also have Penn State football, of course, and Penn State wrestling episodes on here on the Penn State 365 podcast. But for me and Austin, that's another edition of the podcast. Signing off.